Fate Graphite, the castle's gatekeeper, faces ongoing troubles. He grapples with a relentless hunger, a special skill he has possessed since birth. Initially, he dismisses this ability as useless, believing it only serves to increase his appetite. Little did he know that a hidden, extraordinary power lay within. One fateful day, as fate dispatches a sneaky castle intruder, he unveils the true might of his skill. It's a unique ability, one that devours the soul of those he vanquishes, absorbing their capabilities in the process. To his surprise, this act finally quenches his unrelenting hunger, kickstarting Fate's ascent to become the greatest of all. While guarding the Vluric house, Fate watches the squad of warriors happily recount their successful goblin hunt. Feeling a twinge of jealousy, Fate curses his useless skill of gluttony that never allows him to rest, and, as if on cue, his stomach emits a growl so thunderous, it could probably compete with the hungry people in Africa. Later in the evening, the marketplace freezes as the renowned trio of holy knights make an entrance. All of a sudden, an innocent fruit seller accidentally drops a fruit which lands next to Hato Vluric's feet. As the fruit seller apologizes profusely to him, Hato uses his status as the holy knight to incite terror in the man by kicking him hard. Mimil joins his brother and mockingly tells the fruit seller that the penalty of disrespecting a holy knight is execution. Raphael Vluric stops his siblings and tells the fruit seller to be on his way. After terrorizing the marketplace, the holy knights greet their guard, Fate. Raphael throws some coins on the ground and menacingly tells Fate to pick up his wages for the day. As Fate goes to do so, Hato uses his foot to trample Fate's hand. The Vluric siblings then take turns tormenting Fate, mocking the scrawny boy for having a gut that's always grumbling in hunger. While the humiliation might turn on some sick pervs out there, Fate curses his dumb skill for his misfortune. All of a sudden, Roxy Hart, another holy knight, appears on the scene and reprimands the Vluric siblings' treatment. As the siblings smugly make their departure, Roxy offers a kind hand to Fate, who looks extremely pathetic and beaten up. After saving the dude in distress, Roxy tells Fate to come to her if he's being bullied. In an attempt to salvage his last remaining self-worth, Fate replies to Roxy that he's used to it and hurries away to a bar. Seeing the marks on Fate's body and face, the barkeeper discloses to him that if he continues to endure the mistreatment, he will end up in a dire condition, much like the previous fellow who tragically lost his life after enduring years of torment from the Vluric siblings. However, knowing that he has no other option than to put up with it, Fate pays for his food and takes his leave. While walking, Fate notices some intruders trying to breach the castle wall. He quickly rushes and informs Roxy, who tells him to stay alert while she apprehends the intruders. To Fate's misfortune, one of the intruders comes straight towards him. During this crucial moment, Fate realizes his duty and uses a spear to strike down the man. All of a sudden, Fate's gluttony skill kicks in. Unable to register what's happening to him, Fate is met with an apprehensive Roxy, who asks for his well-being. Suddenly, Fate hears Roxy's inner voice and assures her that he's fine and unharmed. Seeing Fate in action, Roxy offers him to work for the Hart family, which Fate graciously accepts. Later at his place, Fate opens the status bar and is shocked to see his stats in the triple digits. He also learns that he now has 2 additional skills of telepathy and identify. Recalling how he was able to hear Roxy's voice earlier, Fate realizes that it was actually the power of telepathy. The next day, Fate visits a shop selling swords. As the friendly shopkeeper asks him his budget and Fate shows him 2 silver coins, the shopkeeper scorns him and asks Fate to look through the pile of trash. Using his skills of identification, Fate finds a sword called Greed. Suddenly, the sword reaches out to the gluttony within Fate and urges him to buy him. Meanwhile, over at the Vluric mansion, Mimil openly reveals her longing for payback against Roxy for taking Fate away. Raphael cautions Mimil, explaining that both the Harts and the Vlurics are crucial pillars of the 5 prominent families supporting the kingdom, and they can't afford to stir up trouble with Roxy. As Fate purchases Greed the sword, he runs into a group of monsters. While fighting them, Fate hears the same voice of skill activation that he heard when he slayed the intruder. After taking down a 100 monsters, Fate finds his status bar filled with new skills. Greed chimes in, remarking that he must be full by now. Thinking about it, Fate realizes that his stomach hasn't growled once today. Greed then discloses to Fate that the gluttony skill allows him to steal stats from his opponents. The sword also warns Fate that he should keep his skill of gluttony hidden from the rest, as it's one of the skills that defy divine law. Fate smiles happily as Greed tells him that from now on, he has him by his side. As per Greed's instruction, Fate collects the goblin's ears and then sells them to the guild, earning some meat for his dinner. No pun intended. However, on his way Fate runs into a gruff man dragging away a girl. Upon touching the girl, Fate discerns that the girl is a hostage. As Fate follows the two to an alleyway, Greed warns Fate that the man he's about to face is dangerous. At an orphanage, an elderly nun reveals to the kids that the creator of the world is known as Holy Laplace. Before departing from the world, Holy Laplace bestowed the people with special powers known as skills. She then instructs the kids to say their graces to Holy Laplace before consuming the meal. As one of the kids expresses his sadness for possessing such a weak skill, the nun reveals to him that in the ancient times when Holy Laplace protected the world, things like skills, stats or monsters didn't exist and everyone was equal. Learning the history, the kid begins to cry, wishing that he was born in the olden times. If this was an attempt to console the kid, it was definitely a very bad attempt. All of a sudden, another nun enters the hall with an anxious look. She informs the elderly nun that she can't find Sahara anywhere. Meanwhile in the dungeon, the man torments Sahara by revealing that she is soon to become a toy for the Holy Knight. Once the man leaves Sahara alone, Fate quickly appears next to the crying girl and assures her that she is going to be okay. Just as Fate frees Sahara from her shackles, the enslaver returns and mocks Fate's sense of justice. Noticing their opponent's cockiness, Greed advises Fate to use the man's arrogance to his advantage. Following Greed's advice, Fate pretends to run away and then seizes an opportunity to strike the man down. With his opponent now at his mercy, Fate orders him to reveal the person behind Sahara's kidnapping. Shockingly, the man reveals that it was all Hatovluric's doing. Hato did give intense Lolican vibes, so no surprises there. Following the successful rescue of Sahara and her safe return to the orphanage, Fate advises her to always stay strong and keep her chin up in the midst of life's trials. After saying his farewell to Sahara, Fate expresses his determination to become more powerful. However, his thoughts are suddenly interrupted by Greed, who advises him to purchase new clothing before heading off to his guard duty at the Heart's Mansion. The very next day, Fate arrives at the Holy Night District and finds himself in awe upon seeing the infrastructure. It's Roxy that pulls Fate out of his daze and takes him to visit the grave of her father. She informs Fate that 5 days ago, her father fought the divine dragon in Gallia and lost his life. What is Gallia, you might be wondering? It's a continent, completely overrun by monsters. Holding back those gruesome monsters is the most important duty of the Holy Knights. Learning such a devastating news from Roxy, Fate clutches his knuckles in uselessness. Roxy notices Fate's expression and assures him that since she is now the head of the Heart family, she will work hard to liven things up. A week later, Fate's stomach begins to rumble once more. While having tea with Roxy, he confides in her, sharing a piece of his past. He tells her that his father, who tragically lost his life during a monster hunt, used to affectionately call him by the nickname Faye. However, during the conversation, Fate ends up losing his consciousness. Upon waking, Fate discovers himself in his chambers with a note from Roxy. She informs him to take the day off, granting him some well-deserved rest. Turning to Greed for answers about his condition, Fate receives insight from the sword. Greed discloses that now that the gluttony skill has savored a soul, it can't be satisfied. Greed continues, explaining to Fate that the more he consumes, the greater his strength will grow. Greed further warns Fate that if he doesn't appease the gluttony skill, it might lead to random, uncontrollable attacks on others or even his own starvation. The red gleam of hunger in his eyes pushes Fate to go on a monster-killing spree. After finally satiating his hunger, Fate encounters the Goblin King. Following Greed's guidelines, Fate slays the Goblin King, earning the skill of auto-recovery. Greed then reveals to Fate that by sacrificing his stats, he will be able to unlock his new form. Since the sword is his one and only partner, Fate decides to sacrifice his stats, turning Greed into a magic bow. Later, Fate cuts the Goblin King's ears and drops them off at the orphanage. The following day, Fate comes across Roxy in a new outfit and discovers that she's going on an undercover inspection mission in the town. As Fate turns to leave, Roxy asks him to accompany her as an escort in this secret mission. Once the two step into town, Roxy cheerfully reveals her alias for the day. She tells Fate to call her Roki. During their conversation, Greed butts in, which irritates Fate. As he tries to scold the sword, Roxy tells Fate to handle his sword with care. Later, while in the marketplace, a lesser-ranked Holy Knight begins harassing Fate, provoking Roxy to intervene. The Knight, puzzled, gazes at her and remarks that she appears oddly familiar. In that critical moment, Greed swiftly advises Fate to play the part of Roxy's lover to avoid blowing their cover. Thanks to Greed's guidance, the situation doesn't escalate further. Shortly after their confrontation with the Knight, Roxy informs Fate that a rogue monster has surfaced in the capital, responsible for killing the Goblin King and severing his ears. Upon hearing this, Fate has an internal moment of realization, understanding that people see him as a monster. The two enter the bar where the barkeeper informs Fate that since people think a rogue monster is on loose, the adventurers will now hesitate to join new quests. When a group of warriors enters the bar, one of the men tries to make advances toward Roxy. In response, she abandons her cover and unleashes her true powers, sending the warriors into a fearful frenzy. However, Roxy swiftly manages to calm them down, apologizing for the mistreatment they've suffered at the hands of the Holy Knights. After a successful adventure, Fate and Roxy return home and get an earful from the head maid, Haru. While being scolded, Fate wishes to continue serving Roxy. Needing a way to hunt without being seen, Fate secretly acquires a magic mask. Later, Fate gives a gemstone to Roxy as a gift for providing him with a job and a place good enough to be called home. Roxy happily accepts it and promises to treasure it. On the other hand, the Vlorix and other knights gather in secret to discuss excursion to Gallia. That's it for now, but if you liked the video, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel for a lot more fun stuff.